They found the missing hiker 3 days after the strange lights appeared in the sky. He was alive, unharmed, but everyone who knew him swore it wasn't really him. This is the chilling story of the man who came back wrong. It all started on what was supposed to be a normal camping trip. For friends, deep in the woods, far from any city glow, around midnight, the forest went silent. Then, the lights appeared. Not a helicopter, not a plane. They were silent, pulsing orbs of light, hovering directly above their campsite. Mesmerized, 3 of the friends stared in disbelief. But the 4th, a man named Alex, seemed almost hypnotized. He stood up, and without a word, started walking directly toward the lights. His friends called out to him, but it was like he couldn't hear them. He walked into the tree line, bathed in that strange glow, and then he was gone. The lights vanished a moment later, plunging them back into darkness and a terrifying silence. They called for help immediately. For the next 3 days, search and rescue teams scoured the area. They used dogs, thermal cameras, everything. They found absolutely nothing. Not a footprint, not a broken twig, not a single scrap of his clothing. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. His friends were frantic. The authorities were baffled. How could a grown man just disappear without a trace? The official search was about to be scaled back, a grim acceptance that he might never be found. And then, on the 3rd day, he reappeared. A park ranger found him wandering near the very trail he had vanished from. He was calm, uninjured, and his clothes were perfectly clean, showing no signs of having been lost in the wilderness for 3 days. When questioned, he just said he got lost and took a long walk. Relief washed over his family and friends, but that relief quickly turned to a deep, unsettling unease. The man who came back wasn't the Alex they knew. Physically, he was identical. Same face, same height, same scar above his eyebrow. But his presence was completely different. The old Alex was loud, always cracking jokes, the life of the party. This new Alex was unnervingly quiet. He spoke in a flat, monotone voice, using words and phrases that felt unnatural, like someone reading from a script they didn't quite understand. He rarely made eye contact, and his friends noticed something deeply disturbing. He almost never blinked. His gaze was constant, fixed, and vacant. When they tried to talk about the lights, he would just stare blankly, as if the memory had been erased. Or, more chillingly, as if it was irrelevant to him. The feeling of wrongness only intensified. He'd sit with his family for hours without saying a word, just watching them with that unblinking stare. He showed no emotion, no happiness at being home, no fear from his ordeal, nothing. It was like interacting with a hollow shell that just looked like their loved one. His friends started to avoid him, their fear overpowering their friendship. They felt like they were being watched, constantly. Their paranoia was proven right in the most terrifying way possible. One of his friends, unable to shake the feeling, checked his home security footage. What he saw sent a chill down his spine. There, at 3 a.m., was Alex. He was standing on the sidewalk across the street from the house, perfectly still, just staring, not moving, not trying to get in, just watching the house with that same empty, unwavering gaze. He checked the footage from the previous nights. It was the same story. Every night since he'd been back, he had stood outside their homes, a silent, motionless sentinel in the dead of night. They were being observed by the thing that wore their friend's face. They never found out what it wanted, or what happened to the real Alex. All they know is that one day, it was simply gone again, leaving behind only security footage, and a fear that will last a lifetime. Imagine you're flying solo, thousands of feet above the ground, with nothing but the endless sky around you. Now, imagine your radio, your only link to the ground, starts whispering back. A pilot's final radio transmission wasn't just static. It was a voice, whispering from inside his own cockpit. This is the chilling story of Flight 734 and the recording from the sky. Our story begins with veteran pilot, Captain Eva Rostova, on a routine cargo run across the remote Alaskan wilderness. Her flight logs from the first hour are textbook, perfect, calm, collected, and precise. But then, something changes. A new entry appears in her log, scribbled in a shaky hand. Unidentified lights, air traffic control confirms it. 3 blips, moving in perfect formation, were tailing her small aircraft. They weren't on any flight plan, had no transponders, and were moving at speeds that defied conventional aviation. Rostova's calm demeanor starts to crack. Her voice, usually steady, becomes strained over the radio as she reports the object's erratic movements. They dance around her plane, closing in, then darting away in the blink of an eye. The tower tries to keep her calm, suggesting they could be weather balloons or a satellite reflection, but she knows better. She's been flying these skies for 20 years. She knows what belongs here and what doesn't. Then, the tower communication takes a terrifying turn. As Rostova speaks, another sound emerges on the frequency, a faint, distorted whisper that seems to overlap her own voice. It's not another pilot cutting in. The sound is too close, too intimate. It sounds like it's right next to her. The air traffic controllers listen in horror, unable to decipher the words, but the chilling tone is unmistakable. It's a sound that doesn't belong on a radio wave or inside the cockpit of a lone pilot. Suddenly, with a final, garbled cry from Rostova, Flight 734 vanishes from radar. The connection is severed. The sky goes silent. For weeks, search and rescue teams scour the vast, unforgiving landscape. They find nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no sign of the plane or its pilot. It's as if the aircraft, and Eva Rostova, simply ceased to exist. The official report lists the incident as an unresolved disappearance, a tragic mystery swallowed by the wilderness. But the story doesn't end there. Months later, a group of hikers stumbled upon a piece of scorched metal deep in the mountains, miles off Rostova's last known flight path. It was the plane's cockpit voice recorder, the black box. Investigators were baffled. The device was found far from any plausible crash site, and it was remarkably intact. They rushed it to the lab, hoping to finally hear what happened in those final, desperate moments. What they discovered was more terrifying than any crash. The recording contained everything they already knew: the calm start, the report of the lights, the growing panic, the strange whispers. But then came the truly impossible part. The recording continued for a full 90 seconds, asterisk after asterisk. The plane had officially disappeared from radar. The sound of the engines was gone. The alarms were silent. All that remained was an eerie, dead quiet. And in that silence, you can hear something else. Faint breathing. It's not the frantic, panicked breaths of a pilot in distress. It's slow, rhythmic, and inhumanly calm. Then, in the final seconds of the tape, a whisper cuts through the silence. It's the same distorted voice from the radio, but this time, it's crystal clear. And it seems to whisper one single, chilling word: Eva. The recording then clicks off, leaving only static and a mystery that continues to haunt investigators to this day. What was in that cockpit with her, and where did Flight 734 really go? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the unknown. Every night, the backyard motion light flicked on, and every single night, whatever was out there was standing just a little bit closer to the house. For a small family living in a quiet rural neighborhood, the dense woods behind their home had always been a source of peace. That is, until the strange activity started. It began with faint lights, then unexplainable sounds, and eventually shadowy figures that seemed to watch them from just beyond the tree line. What started as simple curiosity soon spiraled into sleepless terror when the father decided to set up cameras, only to discover that the things in the woods already knew they were being watched. It all started with an unsettling routine. At precisely 2:14 a.m. every single night, the backyard motion light would snap on, flooding the lawn with harsh, white light. At first, they dismissed it. Deer, maybe raccoons. It was the country, after all. But whenever they'd peek out the window, there was nothing. No movement, just an unnerving silence and a strange, low hum that seemed to vibrate in the air. The family dog, who once loved running in the yard, started refusing to go outside after dark. He'd stand at the back door, barking and growling at the fence, his fur raised. One evening, the father was looking out the kitchen window when he saw them. Small, perfectly round white orbs floating between the trees. They glowed faintly, moving with an eerie, deliberate rhythm, like lanterns carried by invisible hands. That was the last straw. He decided he needed to know what was out there. The next day, he installed high-definition security cameras, all pointed directly at the tree line. He went to bed feeling a little more secure, convinced he'd finally get some answers. The next morning, he poured a cup of coffee and pulled up the footage. What he saw made his blood run cold. Barely visible between the frames were tall, unnaturally thin shapes. They moved in stuttering, glitchy motions far too fast and jerky for any human. As he scrubbed through one clip, one of the shapes turned its head slightly toward the camera. Its face was a smooth, blank canvas, completely featureless, except for two pinpricks of light that glowed where its eyes should have been. Night after night, the escalation continued. The figures in the footage appeared closer to the fence. The motion light started triggering earlier and earlier. The glowing orbs in the woods drifted lower, closer to the ground. One evening, the father was watching the live feed on his phone when he noticed something that made his heart stop. A reflection in the glass of the patio door. He rewound the feed. There it was, a figure, already inside the fence, just standing there, watching the camera. He grabbed the heaviest flashlight he could find and ran to the back door, flinging it open. The yard was empty, but the air was thick with a strange, metallic smell, like burnt wires. The next morning, the family woke up to a disturbing discovery. The cameras were gone. Not broken, not smashed, but ripped clean off their mounts. There were no footprints, no damage to the house, no sign of any intrusion at all. They were just gone. A profound sense of dread settled over the house. They were being watched, and now they were blind. That night, everyone was on edge. And right on cue, the backyard motion light flickered on. The father crept to the window, his heart pounding in his chest, and peered out into the illuminated yard. Nothing. It was empty. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. But then, the light flickered again. Off, then on. In that split second of darkness, his eyes adjusted, and he saw them. At the edge of the woods, no longer hiding, stood several tall, slender silhouettes, and all of them were facing the house. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that will keep you up at night. Stay safe out there, and maybe keep your curtains closed.